He didn't carry a weapon. He didn't chase his victims. He didn't look dangerous. Yet more than 100 children disappeared after meeting him. And the most terrifying part? After confessing to it all, they let him walk free. This is the story of Pedro López, a name that should haunt every parent, every society, every system that claims to protect the innocent. This is not a story of justice. This is a story of failure. A failure so catastrophic that it allowed one man to become the embodiment of humanity's darkest potential. This is the story of the monster of the Andes. Pedro Alonso López was born in 1948 in Tolima, Colombia, into a world that had already decided he didn't matter. His mother was a prostitute. His father was absent. He was one of 13 children, raised in squalor, surrounded by violence, and from the very beginning, taught that life was cheap and pain was currency. When Pedro was 8 years old, his mother caught him touching one of his younger sisters. Her response was swift and brutal. She didn't call for help. She didn't seek counseling. She threw him out onto the streets of Bogotá, a city that devoured children like him every single day. Imagine that for a moment. 8 years old. Alone. Hungry. Surrounded by predators. He didn't stand a chance. Within days, an older man found him. The man offered food, shelter, warmth. Pedro, desperate and naive, accepted. That night, the man raped him. Violently. Repeatedly. It was Pedro's introduction to the world outside his mother's home, a world where trust was a trap, where kindness was a lie, and where the only rule was survival. He ran. He lived on the streets. He begged. He stole. He learned that in this world, there were only two types of people, those who took, and those who were taken from. By the time he was 12, Pedro had been picked up by a family who seemed kind. They took him in, fed him, clothed him. For a brief moment, it seemed like his life might change. But that hope was shattered when the family enrolled him in a school for orphans, a place that should have been safe. Instead, it became another nightmare. The teachers there were not educators. They were abusers. Pedro was molested repeatedly by the staff members who were supposed to protect him. Once again, the adults in his life taught him the same lesson: trust leads to suffering. At 18, Pedro fled. He crossed the border into Peru, hoping to escape his past. But you cannot outrun what lives inside you. The damage had already been done. The boy who had been abandoned, raped, and betrayed had become something else entirely. He had become hollow. He had become calculating. He had become capable of anything. Peru was supposed to be a new beginning. Instead, it became the stage for his transformation. Pedro later claimed that while in Peru, he was gang-raped by a group of men. Whether this was true or another layer of his psychological armor, we may never know. But what happened next is documented. He returned to the place where the attack occurred. He found the men. And one by one, he killed them. Not in a fit of rage. Not in self-defense. With precision. With control. With satisfaction. This was the moment Pedro López discovered something terrifying about himself: he liked it. Killing gave him what nothing else ever had. It gave him power. It gave him control. It gave him a sense of dominance over a world that had always dominated him. But there was a problem. Killing grown men was risky. They fought back. They were strong. They could overpower him. So Pedro made a calculated decision. He would target those who couldn't fight back. He would target children. Between 1969 and 1980, Pedro López became a ghost. He moved like smoke through the poorest regions of Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, targeting indigenous communities, street children, girls from broken families. He chose victims who lived on the margins, children who were already invisible to society. He understood something that most people refuse to accept: the less someone is seen, the easier they are to erase. Pedro didn't hunt in shadows. He hunted in daylight. He walked through villages, through marketplaces, through schools. He watched. He waited. He studied his targets with the patience of a predator who knew the system would never catch him. His selection process was deliberate. He looked for girls between the ages of 8 and 12. Not older. Older girls had more awareness, more caution. Not younger. Younger children were too closely watched. He targeted that narrow window where a child was old enough to be independent but still naive enough to trust. He approached them with a smile. A soft voice. A gentle demeanor. He offered help. He offered food. He offered to show them something interesting, somewhere safe. And because he looked harmless, because he didn't fit the image of a monster, they followed him. Once they were isolated, the mask came off. Pedro would overpower them not with brute force, but with calm, methodical control. He never rushed. He never panicked. He had done this so many times that it had become routine. The fear in their eyes didn't move him. The pleas didn't register. To him, they were not children. They were objects. They were tools for his gratification. He raped them. Then he strangled them. Slowly. Methodically. He later admitted that he looked into their eyes as they died. He said he wanted to see the exact moment the light went out. Afterward, he buried them in shallow graves, often in remote areas near rivers or forests. He didn't mark the graves. He didn't mourn. He simply moved on to the next village, the next town, the next victim. And no one stopped him. How does a man kill over 100 children and remain free? The answer is as disturbing as the crimes themselves. Geography was his shield. Pedro operated across 3 countries, constantly moving. When parents in Colombia reported missing children, the police had no way of knowing that the same man was active in Ecuador or Peru. There was no international database. No communication between jurisdictions. Each case was treated as isolated, local, unsolvable. Society was his accomplice. The victims Pedro chose were poor. Indigenous. Street children. Orphans. Girls whose families were too powerless to demand answers. In many cases, authorities dismissed the disappearances as runaways or accidents. The children simply didn't matter enough. The system was broken. Police forces were underfunded, understaffed, and overwhelmed. Missing children from marginalized communities were not a priority. Investigations stalled. Evidence was lost. Families gave up. And Pedro López kept killing. He later claimed that he killed 3 girls per week at his peak. If true, that means he was operating with assembly line efficiency, selecting, luring, murdering, burying, and moving on, all while society slept. One survivor, yes, there was a survivor, managed to escape during an attempted abduction. She ran to nearby villagers and told them about the man who tried to take her. The community, finally awakened to the danger, caught Pedro and tried to bury him alive in a makeshift execution. But before they could finish, an American missionary intervened. She convinced them to hand him over to the police instead. That decision would haunt the world. When Pedro López was arrested in Ecuador in 1980, authorities had no idea what they had captured. At first, he denied everything. But as evidence mounted, witness testimonies, patterns, locations, he realized denial was pointless. So he confessed. Not reluctantly. Not emotionally. He confessed with the cold, detached precision of someone recounting a grocery list. He admitted to killing 110 girls in Ecuador alone. Then he added more. Over 100 in Colombia. More than 100 in Peru. In total, Pedro López claimed responsibility for over 300 murders. Investigators were stunned. Horrified. Many didn't believe him. The number seemed impossible. But then Pedro did something that turned skepticism into terror. He led them to the graves. One by one, he guided police to burial sites scattered across remote regions. They dug. They found remains. Small bones. Children's clothing. Decomposed bodies that matched his descriptions. By the time they stopped counting, they had confirmed 53 victims in Ecuador alone. And those were just the ones they could find. Pedro showed no remorse. No guilt. When asked why he did it, he gave answers that chilled even seasoned detectives. I am the man of the century. No one will ever forget me. I lost my innocence at age 8, so I decided to do the same to as many girls as I could. I liked the girls in Ecuador. They were more gentle and trusting than Colombian girls. He spoke about his victims the way someone might discuss preferences in food or music. They were not people to him. They were experiences. Objects. Tools for his satisfaction. And yet, even after all of this, even after confessing to being one of the most prolific serial killers in history, the system failed one final, unforgivable time. Pedro López was sentenced to 16 years in prison, the maximum allowed under Ecuadorian law at the time. 16 years. For over 100 confirmed murders. Let that sink in. In 1994, after serving only 14 years, he was released for good behavior. He was deported to Colombia, where he was briefly rearrested on an outstanding warrant. But once again, due to legal technicalities and lack of evidence for new charges, he was declared insane and sent to a psychiatric hospital. In 1998, a $25 fine was paid on his behalf, and he was released. A $25 fine. For the monster of the Andes. And then, he vanished. No one knows where Pedro López is today. No one knows if he's alive or dead. No one knows if he continued killing. Interpol issued a warrant for his arrest in 2002 after a new murder matched his pattern, but he was never found. Some believe he died. Others believe he simply learned to hide better. The most terrifying possibility? That he's still out there. Watching. Waiting. Patient as ever. Pedro López didn't just kill children. He killed trust. He killed the illusion of safety. He exposed the horrifying truth that systems designed to protect the innocent can fail so catastrophically that a monster can walk free. His story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How many children disappeared because society didn't care enough to look? How many predators have learned from his success? How many more Pedro Lópezes are out there, quiet, patient, invisible? The answer is more than we want to believe. Because Pedro López wasn't an anomaly. He was a symptom. A symptom of broken systems, of ignored communities, of a world that prioritizes convenience over justice. He didn't escape prison. He escaped certainty. And that leaves one final, haunting question. If a man like this could walk free once, what guarantees it never happened again? Somewhere in the world, there are parents who never found their daughters. Families who never got closure. Graves that were never discovered. And somewhere, maybe, there is a man who remembers every face. Every name. Every moment of fear. A man who was never truly punished. A man who may still be out there. The monster of the Andes. He didn't carry a weapon. He didn't chase his victims. He didn't look dangerous. And that's what made him unstoppable.